Color is one of the most important things when it comes to creating our own styles and making our characters unique. That's why I'm here to walk you through everything I've learned from studying some of my favorite artists, so you can enrich your own colors as well. We'll be going all the way from base colors to a deep dive into skin, eyes, and hair. I'll also show you a few basic tools along the way, so most popular art softwares will probably do. So let's not waste any more time and jump straight into our base colors. Filling in our base colors should be the easiest part of the process. But if you're working with a background in mind, we want to make sure our character looks like they're actually somewhere and not like they're using a green screen in a Zoom meeting. So let me show you how I make my characters blend in a little better. First, I like to use curves on my base color layer, so I can adjust brightness and contrast. Moving the curve upwards makes the image brighter, while pulling it down makes it darker. Adjusting specific points helps control midtones, highlights, and shadows. This is really useful if your subject isn't receiving light directly. Then we can shift our colors with color adjustment, so they blend better with our scene. Just keep in mind colors are affected by their surroundings. Color adjustment allows us to slightly shift our colors to better match our environments. I like using this tool because it can be hard to guess how a color will look under specific lighting, but it's important we don't overdo it. Adding a small hint is usually enough. These two are really powerful tools and are available in a bunch of art softwares. Just remember, curves for brightness and contrast and color adjustment for blending in. Simple enough, but shading is where a lot of us start struggling, since we're making decisions both about color and volume. But thankfully, whenever we're choosing colors for a shadow, there's a simple formula we can use as a general guide. First, take your base color and make it more saturated, then make it darker. And finally, change the hue very slightly depending on your scene. This is one of the parts where we've got the most room to be creative and make our art unique, since there's not one correct way to go about this. For example, take a look at this. Here's two artists I like a lot, SamDoesArts and Krenz. Notice how Sam decided to use a very high saturation with his shadows, while Krenz are a lot more subtle. Both are very personal to them and look amazing. Same thing happens with brightness. This is a huge part of what makes our styles our own. The more we study, the more we gravitate towards whatever kinds of colors speak to us the most. And now that we have some nice colors, we still need a nice shape to put them on. So let's talk about volume. Working with light is simpler than it seems. It all depends on the kind of surface the light hits. Harder edges create sharper transitions in shadows. You can often see this in places like the neck, below the nose, and basically whatever part of our character that isn't receiving light directly. On the other hand, rounder surfaces transition gradually into shadow. For example, the head as a whole, parts of the face, and limbs. However, most organic surfaces aren't completely flat or round, so shadows usually blend between hard and soft edges. It's important we learn to use both types of shadows, because committing and using hard shadows shows how much an artist understands the shapes they're painting. Now's the perfect time to do a quick shading test. No need for any details, just make sure your big shapes are looking as they should. It's better to notice any mistakes while we're still in the early stages. And now let's see how all of this comes into play when working on an actual character. Thankfully, coloring skin isn't too hard. After choosing a base color you like, there are a few things we can make to do our characters look vibrant and alive. Our bodies have a natural red coloration, so now's a great time to add some blush. You can see this red coloration in other parts of the body, such as ears, shoulders, and parts of our hands. It's also worth noting that if you're working with line art, consider adding some color to it so it blends smoothly with the rest of your skin. Another way to make our characters pop is trying to keep our shadows cool and our lights warm. This depends on your scene, of course, but this contrast in color can make your skin coloring more interesting. You can add subsurface scattering too. This is the saturated glow you can see right between where light and shadow meet on our skin. I'm not sure if this is the case, but I've seen this saturation increase mostly takes place on the darker side of the shapes. And speaking of shapes, we need a nice shape to put our colors on. So besides learning general anatomy and proportions, I think diving deep into the head gives us some of the highest returns on investment, since most of you probably want people to look at your character's face at some point. Understanding these shapes is especially important when drawing more advanced poses and angles, because they interact a lot more when they're not being viewed from the front. But anyways, moving on to the eyes. We are naturally drawn to eyes, so we need to give them special attention. There are way too many ways to make an eye unique, but there's two things to always keep in mind. First, eyes are sphere-shaped, meaning most of the time they will have a soft shadow under the eyelid. Second, eyes are glossy, so they reflect light. This is what allows artists to go crazy with reflections. There's also a lot of room for characterization in here. Depending on how you play with your reflections, you can make your character look very alive. So go ahead and take a look at your favorite character's eyes, or how artists you like paint them. Notice what kinds of shapes they are using and how many colors are they working with. I won't talk too much about eyelashes because I hate them, but they contrast really nicely with the whites of the eyes and can make them look bigger and brighter. But also consider coloring them slightly in case they're popping out too much. However, hair can be hard to color too, because of how many small moving parts it has. This is where I think your base drawing matters the most, since that's where we make most of our decisions with hair. There's a lot of different hairstyles and textures, but whenever you're drawing, it's good to keep a few things in mind. First, choose a point of origin and stick to it. Choosing a point or line where every strand comes from is really helpful. Even for short hair, having direction makes everything so much easier. This is why it's important to have a reference, since it takes away most of the guessing. Also, try working your way down from big shapes. Don't bother with the smaller locks and stray hairs just yet. It's probably more important to make sure your hair has the shape you want first. Noticing negative space in between the hair is also really helpful, since it's a great way to check if everything is in place. Being mindful of negative space makes it easier to keep proportions in check, and it can help you notice mistakes easily. As for coloring hair, we can get very creative too. There's two main things to take into account. First, hair is reflective, so it often takes on colors from its surroundings. It's a great idea to use strong and saturated colors on the opposite side of the color wheel, like Ask and Hanacue do here. It's also translucent, meaning light can pass through, creating glowing effects. This can be achieved by painting over a section of the hair with your light color in an overlay layer. I know it can look very scary at first, but you can do it if you take it step by step. Try squinting your eyes and notice the big essential shapes of the hair as a whole. Since most heads are round, it can be helpful to treat it like a sphere. Add a general shadow and maybe some bounce light before going into any details. Then you can select individual strands and work on smaller shadows and blending your colors, like the ones that the strands cast on each other or on the skin. A lasso tool can be especially useful here, since you're probably working on very precise details. Even after being an artist for a few years now, I'm still amazed by how hard color can be at times. So don't be too hard on yourself if you're struggling. You should feel proud just for trying, as you're juggling values, form, saturation, hue, anatomy, storytelling, and more. If you're having trouble planning all of that, I've recently made a video about how to plan a drawing, so check it out if you like. But anyways, thank you for watching this far into the video. I hope you found something of value here.